Hey there, we are the Movie Marks, where we take our favorite movies that we think hit the mark and bring it to you and tell you why we think it hits the mark. I'm Matt Dewis, a.k.a. Uncle Dew.
And I am Randy Kirk.
And so welcome to the show, everybody.
Thanks for being here. And in this particular episode, we're talking with our guest, Ryan, a.k.a. Hank, about a movie that he's bringing that hits the mark for him.
So, Hank, welcome.
Hi,
Thank you so
everybody.
much. Our first guest on Movie Marks.
I'm here.
First guest.
So, Hank, in this format, we ask our friend who is also a movie mark what movie they think hits the mark. And Hank, what did you bring for us that
I brought
hits the mark for
1982, right? John Carpenter's The Thing to the mark to everyone's ears.
So first question for you, Hank, is why did you choose to bring The Thing?
Well, I was trying to think of I don't know, a movie I think everyone would like, because I like a lot of bad movies, and I think that's kind of fun. But also, it's not fun to talk about bad movies with people and whatever.
With this group, maybe.
Then you just end up defending them and stuff, and it doesn't. Let's get along. We don't have to fight. Why do we gotta fight?
Yes.
So yeah, and I don't know. I was when we originally started talking about this, it was around spooky, scary Halloween times. And what better movie than The Thing for that kind of time?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So question number 2, Hank, is can you remember the first time you saw John Carpenter's The Thing?
I can, yes. I'm entering my mind palace right now.
Theater of the Mind. Here we go.
I think it was, I think when I originally saw it, I didn't actually see the whole thing. I think I caught it on TV, on cable, AMC, probably during a Halloween time or something like that. And, it was definitely in the mid 2000s and flipping around the cable channels and whatever. Yeah. And it was the scene, and we'll get into the movie or whatever. I don't know what the format is here, but there's the scene, the CPR scene, and the chest and the chomp and the head, the scene, right?
That is
if you're gonna land on any scene, it's gonna be that, and you're just I was just what the hell is this? Where's this been all my life?
It's awesome.
Why don't I know what this is? And then I watched the whole thing from there, and then I eventually figured out what it was, and then found it and watched the whole thing again, and it was even better watching obviously the whole thing than just in the last third of the movie or whenever that happens in the movie.
I'm trying to gauge here. So this is early 2000s.
This is probably around theater-y time.
You have potentially watched the alternate version in which they didn't play Stevie Wonder's Superstition in the dining scene with the chef.
Yeah, they put that back in. I don't remember what year they put that back in.
Only just recently because of all of that. So at one point in time, because they never cleared it, right?
Okay.
In 82, he did not clear it, and he was just listening to Stevie Wonder's Superstition. And so when we watched it over again, of course it's back in there because they were like, oh, we can do this now.
What a crazy time to make movies. Back in the Wild West. John Carpenter just doing whatever the hell he wanted to do.
Wants.
Okay, so are you sort of propense to this sort of movie? Are you a horror movie guy? Are you more of a thriller movie guy? What I would say, where do you line up with?
I would say I would be more of a creature kind of guy. It's kind of where I fall into things. I feel like horror movies are so just massive in the different genres they can cover.
It's a very broad genre.
Right. And I think in the 80s especially, we had more of those slasher, creature kind of thing. Yeah. And then the 90s was just kind of the 90s, and
right, slasher. I mean, thank you, John Carpenter. Right, he really kind of he wasn't the first, but he basically gave us the template for what a slasher movie should be.
And I think around the time where I was when we all at one point worked in a movie theater together, and that's how we became friends and whatever. And I think around that time in the mid-aughts, The Ring came out, and then it turned into PG-13 ghosts kind of movies, and kind of that kind of stuff, and it's kind of stayed that way, and the Paranormal Activities and stuff like that. And we haven't had a ton of creature movies. And
so when District 9 came out, were you all in on that?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I love all those Neil Blomkamp movies. I think he's cool. I haven't watched the Gran Turismo yet or whatever, but I watched all the other ones, and I
watched the first 5 minutes.
Right.
I watched the first 5 minutes. When Hooper was talking to Legolas. Their names are not hitting right now. So when Hooper's talking to Legolas, and they're like, "You're gonna take an untested F1 driver who's good at video games, and you're gonna let him drive? That's unheard of." I was out. Yeah, I saw that scene, and I was like, "Nope, no, thank you." No wonder this went direct to direct to streaming.
It doesn't look very good.
No, I don't know. I'd watch it though at some point. But anyway, yeah.
Okay. Actually, dude, that was a question that I had, but I'm going to follow up here and just say, or ask you, are you a fan of other John Carpenter movies?
I'm trying to think of like other than obviously the first thing that pops in my mind is Halloween.
Sure.
And obviously like that. And I think I don't know, the sense of Halloween kind of has a cold open, kind of doesn't, kind of just throws you in there.
Yeah.
And I feel like this also does that. And also like it's most of the movie kind of takes place like at the house and whatever, and this is similar, like takes place at one kind of place and so there's like similarities in that and stuff like that. I'm trying to think of like other John Carpenter.
The Fog, Escape from New York, Escape from L.A., I think Big Trouble Little China.
I think the escape movies are like some pretty, I enjoy those movies and stuff like that.
I'm action John Carpenter myself. So,
really?
So Escape and Big Trouble, all of that. I'm a little less. I like Halloween for what it was. I'm very appreciative of what it did because there was that time between 68 and 76 where it was just schlock and bad, right? Like horror.
They were all drive-in
right
movies,
right?
And not saying that there isn't a time and place for that sort of thing, which I love a good creature feature or a good don't stay awake, sort of thing, and that has its time and place. But I think the relaunch of the genre, the kind of this is what horror can be. It's almost like what Scorsese and Coppola and did all that for the epic movie, as it were. Carpenter went, it's okay that we can make good horror slasher genre movies.
Well, it can be tasteful, right? Because you look at The Thing, and I mean, on paper, it's kind of goofy, right? Because any alien invasion kind of movie, it's like, oh, it's out of this world, it's stupid, it's silly. But this was done so tastefully that it was realistic, and there was the actors that are portraying these guys, they're guys that you believe, right? And it's like, oh yeah, this is actually a serious movie, even though it's not. It's silly, but I agree with you that he kind of took it to a different level.
So funny enough, this is a remake. Howard Hawks did the original, The Thing from Another World in 56, I think.
Yeah. Which actually can be seen. The kids are watching it in Halloween.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Carpenter's Halloween. Yeah, they're watching it on TV.
It's okay. It actually has to do with the Arctic Circle to the north instead of Antarctica to the south. Mm-hmm. And it's all right, but it is that same thing that we had talked about. It is that there's something about the 50s where it was like because of the geopolitical era. You have to be aware of communists, or what could your neighbor be? What sort of thing was happening? And some have said part of the reason why Alien or this thing, 1982, was done is because of the geopolitical environment that we were at that point in time in 1982 as well. This is a very good representation of what the AIDS epidemic could possibly be. Watch out for the blood.
Who's infected? Who has the
I know I got a little bit serious on us there. But we can also see that with Alien. We see that with a lot of the stuff that was going on at that point in time. Sorry. So let's.
No, it's very real, right? Yeah, because I think that they do a pretty good job of that. Because you unless you take that blood sample, like you don't know. Like is this an imitation or
Well, and good horror to me, and good like thriller genre to me is there's always a little bit of truth in that, because it hits to the base self. It hits to your deepest core. If there wasn't that little inkling of okay. Yeah. It hits something to that human side of things. Sorry. Got way philosophical on a fucking horror movie. I'm so sorry.
But I think it was kind of meant to be that a little bit. Yeah. Because I think you're right. John Carpenter, for what he is, he's the master of horror or whatever. Right. But he's a fairly deep guy. He's a smart guy. So I think that, there were elements of that in here. So you're not off base.
So just talking a little bit more in the production side of everything, and just giving a little bit more tidbit here and there.
Fun facts.
Fun facts that they'll do. So I personally think John Carpenter was the one who shaped the way that this sort of genre hits now. This is how, because
you're talking horror or sci-fi.
This sort of sci-fi horror, right? Yeah. So beforehand we had Alien, and that was okay, but that was a man in a rubber suit. And John Carpenter.
You just called Alien okay?
Yeah, it's all right. Oh my
god,
it's okay. I'm sorry, the Alien itself, like Jean-Claude Van Damme in a suit. It's a little too much. Like, I'd take Predator over Alien any day.
Well,
but that's a little bit more schlocky as well because you get Arnold and Carl Weathers. I think the whole use of the Predator is a lot better than the use of the Alien.
I'll take Alien. I'll take Predator. I'll take The Thing. And I'll fucking like it.
So essentially the Thing was made because I don't want to make a man in a rubber suit movie, right? That's what John Carpenter did here. But I think it shows something to how well this movie was done and how well he changed the landscape of horror. That 1956, The Thing wasn't that great. 2011's prequel, because they didn't want to remake it, right, didn't do a great job.
Yeah.
And so, like, how can you already express on greatness when, you know?
Right.
Well, so just segueing it back to you, Hank.
Yeah.
So he talked about the practical effects here, and they were all practical effects. Yeah, obviously, this is really before the digital age.
I love when they just light a puppet on fire. It's so great. Just like,
but I think they're often praised, for their use of practical effects here. Are there any scenes or transformations that impressed you the most?
I think I like the dog scene.
Yeah.
And I think the dog is like, I think the actual dog, which I had its name, it's like Jed the dog, which is like a wolf.
Good boy.
Is a wolf dog apparently.
Yeah.
And I think that helps.
12 out of 10 would pet.
Right.
Bestest boy.
Oh yeah. 100%. But I think he adds like a lot to that character and stuff like that. Just like the way he like stops and he's like also creepy and like whatever. I think whatever's wolfness comes in. But I think the actual transformation and the other dogs like flipping around this dog that like turns into like an explosion of dog spaghetti and is like flying around. And even like the noise that it makes, like as it's like whipping around these little tentacles of like, it almost sounds like a rattlesnake, or you can just tell like, this is not a good thing, man. This is a bad thing.
And the little hoses that come out of the back, and then it sprays the other dog.
Oh yeah, the spraying a dog.
And
God, you're just shooting a dog with goo.
Right, a real animal,
like a real dog.
Oh no!
Was PETA on the set?
Probably
absolutely
not. Just hosing down a dog.
But it is really the most ridiculous transformation, and that's saying a lot because there are some pretty ridiculous.
That's the first one, right?
It's the first one, but it's like so out of this world as it's supposed to be, but it's ridiculous and it's amazing.
It like sets the stage for the entire the rest of the
Rob Bottin, right?
Yeah.
He was 22 when he did this. This was his first like full feature all by himself.
Can you guys imagine at 22 years old coming in and being like, all right, you're going to be lead on this. You got to build these practical effects and just go with it.
Right.
It's like, what?
Didn't it send him?
I couldn't do that.
Send him to the hospital because he essentially lived.
I think so. Yeah.
In the practical workshop.
Yeah.
Because he was so exhausted and overworked.
And that was a note that I had too about the budget, because I think they had to keep increasing the budget, where it was like originally like $200,000 that eventually crept up to I think $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my god, like
it's all these practical effects, right? You're like actually blowing up a set and you're like doing all sorts of stuff, and
animatronics and gallons of this and that.
Right.
And
So, hey, you asked Hank about his favorite practical effects.
Yeah.
Mine wasn't actually like effects based. So in the beginning when McCready, so sorry.
You should be.
When McCready was in they show them getting in the helicopter or whatnot.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is that whoever they got to as the pilot, he's like, "You want me to crash the helicopter? That'd be great. We can crash the helicopter." And Carpenter was like, "No, absolutely not. Let's not do that." But he, at that point in time, and you can see it in the final edit, the helicopter kind of wobbles.
Yeah.
He gave the control over to
Kurt Russell.
And so that's why it wobbles a little bit, because he's like trying to control it. So that's one of my favorite is like all of the big like use of all the props. That's they used the sets, and they only went to one location, right, in British Columbia.
Right. Otherwise, they were on a soundstage in L.A. Yeah.
Right. The use of the sets, the use of the scenery and everything, I think that gives a whole ambiance that,
it's perfect. Yeah. You really do feel isolated.
A lot of directors are using right now. Like I see I see a lot of the Thing in the girl with the dragon tattoo.
And do you have an example? Like, what do you mean?
So, I want to say about 45 minutes in, there's that stark wind, and maybe it's because it's just snowy or whatever, but it's these
you're just talking about the bleak.
Yeah,
I got you.
Big, wide, like sweeping shots of these icy fields and whatnot. Like that whole intro to the Thing.
Yeah,
it just like I was like, okay, I can see where the influence came from.
Sure,
with things like Girl with a Dragon Tattoo or any other movie.
There's something about the air, like that just is like really thick, and it makes you feel like almost isolated. Just like it's almost like you're in another world or like another planet or whatever.
Yeah,
or you're underground or underwater. I mean, and it's just like you're completely like isolated. Like just even like the environment is like crushing you down.
Actually, I think Carpenter went back and I think he filmed some additional scenes outside because there were just so many scenes that were indoors. They thought that this was just a movie about guys that were talking indoors.
Yeah, we don't want any guys who are talking. This movie is about guys who are
They
talking.
went out and filmed some additional scenes, and so I think it added to it. But even when you're outside, like you do feel isolated. You can't go anywhere.
Right.
So, yeah, well done.
Well, just everything about this movie, like the cast as well.
Yeah.
This is he's the voice in everything.
Are you gonna say Keith David?
Keith David, yes.
Yeah.
Keith David's first movie. We got the wonderful Wilford Brimley.
I didn't realize it was him until yesterday when I was doing research. I have it literally in my notes like, wait, that's just Wilford Brimley without a mustache?
Yeah.
This is something that I was talking about at the beginning of this episode here, because like for some reason these guys are credible. You know? And it's like you put today's actors in this type of situation and it's like it might seem a little bit goofy,
right?
But you put Wilford Brimley, you got Keith David, you got Kurt Russell, and you're like, I trust these guys. Right. These guys are legit.
Well, Wilford Brimley was a cowboy originally, right? And so like when he's digging into that goo, they're like, "You're okay with this?" And he's like, "I'm just doing my laundry." Like it's another day.
Dude, these practical effects.
It's another day for work for him.
Right.
Like he's a workhorse. I love Brimley to the core, man. Like Keith David too. They live.
But truly, the practical effects. Going back to it again, because you were talking about the dissection scenes, and he's pulling out these organs, and I'm like, I'll be damned. Those look like real damn organs.
Right.
Like everything about it is just
Or like when they're like peeling away, and there's like the dog face in the one guy after they're like doing the autopsy and whatever. And
the subtleties. Because I think Wilford Brimley, his character Blair, you can see. I think it's later on in the movie. Well, it's obviously after he transforms, but you could see his face on the side of the Thing.
Right.
And it's like, man, just like little details like that. God, it's crazy. So we talked a little bit about the practical effects, Hank.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change it over to the music on the technical side of it. So Ennio Morricone, like he scored this. How does the score contribute to the overall experience for you here?
And remember, this is the first time John Carpenter does not score his own film.
Right.
First time.
Right. The music didn't like strike me too much. I feel like it's memorable in like those like moments or whatever of like this crashing kind of hitting sound. It's remind me, it's not like super synthy, right? It's not like
it's a little because he changed.
It's like the normal 80s amount of synth, right? It's not like over it or
it's not quite John Carpenter level,
it is
but
Italian synth. That's what I like to call it.
Spaghetti synth,
right?
But it's Ennio Morricone, obviously the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Man with No Name trilogy, like he's known for that kind of shit, like the westerns,
right?
But then doing this, he tried to get as close to a John Carpenter score as possible.
Right.
So, and I think he succeeded. Go ahead.
Funny enough, though, I don't know if you know this, right? Yeah. He was completely panned for this score. Poor Ennio.
Okay.
Because everybody was so in love with his Man with No Name trilogy, and his everything that he's did in the Western side, he got just lambasted on this. The funny enough is he reused a lot of the unused soundtrack. In this for Tarantino's Hateful Eight.
Okay.
In which he won an Oscar.
And that's like also kind of like a similar thing where it's like just
isolation.
a group of people isolated
cold,
and
windy. Yeah.
And so
interesting.
Funny, 1982,
right?
Absolutely panned. 2015, 2017, you win an Oscar for that shit that you just did. In 82.
Right. Yeah. That's weird. That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, but for Carpenter to hand it over,
right?
I mean, he's a music guy, and obviously, I mean, he scored Halloween, and he's like these big.
He goes on concerts, he goes on tours, and like
So I think obviously it's a tip of the hat, like paying respect to Ennio. And,
was there a reason for that specifically? Was that like a studio thing? Was that like a running out of time kind of thing?
This was his first big budget film, and he just didn't think he was going to have the time to to actually
split the focus that much.
Focus on that as much. And the same thing goes with Rob Britton as well. He has a cameo in The Fog, and he's like, well, I kind of want to cameo in this too, and they were like, absolutely not. The shit that you have to do in this, no, you are not. You're not having
doing
a cameo
that on top of that.
And he's like, okay, well, it sounds good. You know.
Yeah.
I wrote about Jed being a good boy.
Jed. Love Jed. Can't get enough of Jed.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Well, like, this was clearly a panned film. Like, in 1982, nobody liked this film, unfortunately.
It is unfortunate.
I don't know when it released. Do we know? Like, I know it came out around the same time as E.T., but I don't know. Like, is it a summer thing or
2 weeks after E.T. June 25th, 82. Fun fact: it was released the same day as Blade Runner.
So knowing that fact, Hank, are you Blade Runner or are you The Thing?
Oh, I'm The Thing for sure.
Yeah.
I'm like a big like Star Wars sci-fi guy too, but still, like, I don't know.
I'm 100% with you as well. But both of them, unfortunately, they both suffered the fate of E.T.
Right.
like, bigness.
Well, and that's also why it suffered, because, I mean, Blade Runner being a little bit different, sort of like artificial intelligence, it's not aliens per se, but so that people didn't necessarily go see The Thing, which was rated R. They went to E.T., you know, because it's PG, family friendly. Right. Yep. What alien story are you going to want to see? Or take your kids to, you know? So, it did unfortunately get kind of shit on because it was up against E.T.
Yeah.
Well, so I do want to talk about the practical effects again, just once more, because
I'd love.
So Blair's fingers through Gary's cheeks at the end. So Wilford Brimley, you know, when he grabs him, it still gets me because I really do look at it. And I'm like, I obviously know, like, that's goofy, that's ridiculous, that's fake, but I'm like, damn it, does that look good?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's almost more scary than like getting ripped apart by like some crazy teeth like monster or something.
Yeah, a little bit, right?
Because you like. I understand what that feels or would feel like if something bit me really hard or whatever. Yeah. I don't know what it feels like to have fingers go into my face like that and get dragged around by my face and like.
And it just looks so real.
Right.
Yeah.
We've had so much like gore and violence and blood or whatever, and then for like your hand to stuff melt into someone else's face is like, well, I don't know what's happening. This is like truly alien compared to like some of the other stuff.
I have a texture thing anyways, and so I'm like, oh, this is icky.
Right.
But that one, it just always stood out to me. And then of course Norris's head.
Yeah.
You know, Norris's head just growing the legs and just walking out and
the eyes and the.
Yeah. And then the "Are you fucking kidding me?" line.
So we assume at some point the alien thing or whatever, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, at some point also like absorbed like some creature that kind of looked like a big lobster crab thing at some point, and that's why it decided to turn into that at one point.
That's
was it? I don't know like the rules of the thing, and I don't know if anyone does. And it seemed like looking back and trying to like read some like behind the scenes things, like they didn't really know the rules either.
No,
and maybe that's good. Maybe that's like the fun of it and the brilliance of it. I don't know.
I have a few things that we could get into, but we kind of have to fast forward to the end here for that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys want to. We can flip flop here back and forth. But so all right. I'll ask the next question. How did you interpret the ambiguous ending of the film, and do you have any theories about the fate of the last two characters?
I don't know. I like. I feel like. I wish the ending had like a bigger like set piece. Like I wish it wasn't like just the one big monster and we like throw the dynamite at him and like that's kind of it. Mm-hmm. And we don't know where like Childs is the whole time and like I don't know. And maybe I don't know if it would be better or worse to have like the summer blockbuster moment of like Childs and McCready like just like blasting them with like guns or like whatever and like they turn in like the Predator at the end. I don't know if that's like a better thing or not. I like to think that both of them are not things or not aliens at the end or not whatever. Well, you know, when they're both sitting there like in the ice like freezing to death or whatever. But I don't know if that's true or not.
There are a couple theories, because there was, of course, the 2011 prequel that came out. And so one of the theories in that movie, and I haven't seen it in 13 years or almost since it came out, but one of the theories there is that when the Thing replicates.
Right.
That it doesn't take any of the inanimate objects with it.
Yeah.
And so when you see Childs at the end of the 1982 The Thing, you can see he still has his earring.
Yeah.
So that supports the theory that he's not the Thing.
Sure. Yep.
There's also another fan theory. This isn't my theory. That MacReady, he has the bottle of J&B at the end. And of course, they were throwing around Molotov cocktails, right? Or he was. And so there was a theory that the J&B bottle, it didn't actually have the whiskey in it. It had gasoline.
Yeah.
And so when he handed the bottle over to Childs, and Childs took a drink of it, not knowing what alcohol or gasoline should taste like, he didn't react to it. So there's a couple weird theories going on. Right. So I this is, of course, just 40 some odd years of people theorizing.
Sure.
But it's just, I find it all very interesting. But also another one that I noticed watching it back last night, when MacReady Kurt Russell's talking, you can see his breath. You can see the breath coming out. With Childs, you can't until the very end, but I did notice you could see a little bit of his breath. But for most of that conversation at the end, you couldn't see Childs' breath.
No.
So I thought that was interesting. So I'm still, it's like, ooh,
I like that we don't know, obviously, and I think that's fun. I think it's fun that throughout the whole movie, going back to the rules too, like there's no set of rules for anything. We don't know who's who, and like we as an audience kind of get to like play the game, with everyone else, and like the mystery and stuff like that of just not knowing who's
Speaking
what
of,
and where.
There's a great one versus everyone board game.
Got it.
The thing.
Oh, cool.
And there's a couple of extenders. It's pricey.
Or like
it's been on my wish list for quite some time. It's a fantastic play.
Right.
So I also think it's fun not knowing. Because you look back on it, you're like, even after however many times I've watched this movie, and it's like you still are a little bit unsure.
Right.
So it makes it more fun.
So the thing was actually a book as well.
Yeah.
And so.
What was the name of the book? Who Goes There?
Who Goes There? Yeah. And so instead of... This movie went through a couple of run-throughs, right?
Okay.
It was either going to be a complete remake of the 56 movie.
Okay.
And Carpenter didn't really like it because it didn't take from the source material as much as it should have. And they couldn't, right?
Right.
How do you film something from 1982 in 1956, right?
Right.
Like, we see... As we grow as a civilization, we understand, 1991's The Terminator doesn't look, or 92's Terminator 2 doesn't look the same as, say, Avatar, nowadays. And so that just shows you, like, 56.
Even though the same director. And
there's this reason why certain directors sit on properties so that they can put something out because of how... So, Carpenter wanted to go, well, I want to go back to the source material a little bit more. And so there's an alternate script by Tobe Hooper, in which it is very Jaws, but with aliens.
Yeah.
There's a whole, like, Quint character, and, like, it's very Captain Ahab-y, and they're all trying to hunt. It's an awful script, and thank God they didn't use it. But
for a movie like this, it's 100% a John Carpenter project, not Tobe Hooper.
Absolutely. And so what Carpenter did was take as much from the source material as he possibly could to get it. And it sort of leaves the ending ambiguous, the book does. There's this whole thing, and this is true to life. Anytime an Antarctic or an Arctic Circle group goes away, they're in constant radio contact with whatever base of operations they're at. And so the moment that radio contact goes away, they will send a search party immediately.
Right. Yeah.
And so, my ending of 1982's The Thing is, like, we see it with the Adrienne Barbeau voiced computer. She talks about how it would take 2 years for this living organism to take over the Earth. And I'm pretty sure, like, everything that it was doing was it's getting its machinations into,
Right.
There's going to be a search party that's going to come there. The Thing is going to continue on because of, Childs, taking a sip of the gasoline or all of that.
I don't know anything about it, but there is a PlayStation 2 Xbox game that came out in 2002 that is a sequel.
I never played it either.
I've never played it either. I know it exists. I don't know like the plot or whatever, but it is like a recovery team that like comes to the site and shenanigans happen. But
it sounds so fun, and we should get a copy and we should play it.
So during that same time, 2003, Sci-Fi Channel was going to make a 4-hour mini-series about a sequel, but that fell through because cost and so on and so forth.
You talk about Adrienne Barbeau as the voice in the computer. I think that's very interesting. I've thought this a time or two before, because at the beginning of the movie, Kurt Russell, clearly has trouble trusting artificial intelligence or whatever, where he's playing this computer game. And so he says, whatever he says, cheating bitch, and he pours the whiskey in there. And then at the end of the movie, he doesn't trust Childs. He really doesn't trust anything probably at this point.
Right.
But I thought that was a cool kind of, not even a juxtaposition. It's just very, he's tried and true that he doesn't trust things that he doesn't understand.
Right. It's that isolationist idea as well.
Right.
So I think that's pretty cool.
Are we to assume that like Childs and McCready like had like a tiff at some point, or had like an issue at some point or whatever? I feel like they're always like against each other a little bit. And I don't know if like someone is trying to like comment on like racism or whatever. They don't really do that with the chef, which is also an African American guy, and like so I don't know. I feel like especially like when they were like they kind of had the guns out and whatever, and they were trying to figure out who's like going to be the leader, whatever, and that Childs was going to do it, and everyone's like, not you, you're too hot-headed or whatever, and like I just don't. And maybe it's just more of this like kind of cold open, kind of thrown in. We're trying to like build up these characters through.
So the great thing about Carpenter is like he allows the actors that he hires to flesh out. Like he gives them it's a fucking it's a David Guest movie, except for they actually do have lines, but they come up with their own sort of character like backstories, their whole character sort of ideals and stuff like that, and he lets them run with it. Like Windows was completely named something else, and he's like, I'm Windows now. and Carpenter's like, yep, you're Windows now. And so Keith David was like, well, I'm a big swinging dick. McCready's a big swinging dick. So, of course, I'm going to have problems with everybody else who's a big swinging dick on
Got
here.
it, okay.
And so funny enough, you say that, like, when they were workshopping everything, when they were going through their character studies, they're like, Keith David is just one of those off-putting personalities on the base that he probably has beef with a lot of people on base. Not just... and so, that's pretty how much I absolutely love that you thought that as well. And I was like, Keith David's like just it really is a masterclass on acting as well. It really is. Going from terror and whatnot and the thrills of everything, it's one of my favorite horror genre. It might be in my top 10 in the way of horror genres. Because it's a little bit more on the thriller side. It is a little less supernatural. It's a little bit more in the sci-fi sort of thing. Right.
I like that. Like you can see a cut of this where like they cut out like that opening alien shot and like some of the alien stuff, and it's just like a creature that they dug out of the ground or whatever that just happens to like be there and whatever. But I kind of like that it's like we're grounded a little bit in like, oh, it is aliens, and it's even weird. Like it's weird to think about like the Thing. Like piloted a ship at one point.
Yeah.
What the hell does the inside of that ship look like? And what does like the like core like actual Thing alien like look like? And like do they have a society where like there's a factory of them building ships and whatever? Like what is going on here? And it even tries to like build like that little ship in the ground that obviously was made out of like helicopter parts and pans and anything you could really find or whatever. And I would assume that's less to like space travel, more just to like get out of the Arctic to get to wherever and like expand their infectious, like whatever, spread their parasitic alienness and
imitate people in the Caribbean for Christ's sake.
Yeah. I also was like wondering at one point, like it was before I was like, well, I watched it again and I was like, you remember parts here and there. And I forgot they made that little extra ship because originally I thought like, well, maybe it was like an alien like species that was like, had a society and whatever, and they got infected, and that's why it like crash landed into the Earth and whatever, and then this like parasitic alien species came out. And
that's what's so great about something that's ambiguous as this, and John Carpenter, is that he lets his viewers and his audience just go into a lore dump for themselves.
Right.
Like there's certain directors nowadays who are like, well, here's the Bible.
Right.
Of how our universe works, and this is how all of the universe works, and it's all explained here. But like,
And then that goes to the marketing team, and like, here's the IP Bible, and here's how we're gonna make toys out of this stuff, and here's this, and here's that.
But how creative is it, and how much of an auteur is it that he's like, you let your theater of mind play fucking.
Well, it's just crazy. Proof that you're hiring the right people for the job,
right? Because
otherwise, like anybody, you could hire any one of us to go in and say, all right, you're gonna say these lines in this way. And any one of us could act the scene,
right? But
if you hire an actor to do what their job is, like, hey, you hired the right person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, look, I've got a few last questions here, but I mean, any other thoughts about effects or music or anything like that? I think the only other thing that I had was, at close to the end there when they set the thing on fire again, and he's walking out of the building. He kind of like goes through the wall, and
the dynamite, and
it's Tony Caesar on fire for the most of the decade of the 80s into the 90s. If you're setting a guy on fire, it was Tony Caesar.
Which
I appreciate.
That's the whole thing about stunt performers as well, right? Like, through the whole grouping community, you know that you can get one guy that does like so there's the guy who was on the James Bond, and I think it's the 83 one where the Aston Martin goes on two wheels.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
And that guy was only the guy that they got to do the two wheels on every other movie.
Right. He was a two-wheel guy.
He was the two-wheel guy.
What a job.
And so in the community, it's always like, okay, that person rides on the hood of the car. Get that guy.
And the old two-wheel Tony over here. Yeah. We gotta...
Excuse me, secretary. I need two-wheel Tony on the phone right now.
Right now.
Is he busy?
Yeah. The one thing I liked that isn't really like an effect, but like just helps and is probably like super dangerous. Another thing that would just never happen today is like, well, it goes back to the dynamite too, of them like, that was a huge explosion like next to whatever that some person was, or it was Kurt Russell or whatever. And also like Kurt Russell's like holding real ass flares like right up to his face like the whole time, or like just and it's just
so like, there's that one scene where he lights one off. And you can tell he's going as fast as he possibly can because that fucking hurt.
Right. There's a real flare like right next to this dude's face. And like
there's a scene where he kicks the barrel over and then he uses the flamethrower, and I'm pretty sure that he was legitimately surprised because you could see him jump in the scene, and it's like these are real effects using real flamethrowers.
Right. I don't know if it's like a real flamethrower, real flamethrower. I think it's just like a big. Well, I guess it throws flame, but it doesn't like stick like whatever, But
I know exactly what you mean. But yeah, like
it's a torch.
There's
basically
danger with what they're using.
But also also all these things.
So you were talking about kind of where it ranks for you in horror, sci-fi, or whatever.
Yeah.
So Hank, where would you put The Thing, or where would it rank on your list of all-time movies?
All-time movies. I don't know. It would probably be in the top 10 somewhere.
I
think, yeah. I don't have like a list off the top of my head, but like
some people don't have lists. I like lists,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could probably rattle off like.
How are you a friend and you don't have lists with us?
Well, let me pull out my list here out of my pocket. Got to keep with me all the time.
How dare you, Hank?
But no, I think it would be in the top 10. I think, yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Definitely.
I mean, it's pretty heralded. Yeah, I mean, it's up there, right?
I don't know how many other horror movies I think I would have in my top 10. I think my favorite like horror movie like series, I like Evil Dead, and that just also is like just kind of fun, practical effects, campy, silly, and that includes like Army of Darkness and stuff like that, which is also just like super slapsticky and
like I had talked about before. This kind of dawns the age of new horror because we get The Fly. Eventually after this.
What year's that?
I think it's
86.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's in that same area or whatever.
Right. Which again, based on a 50s movie.
Yep.
Which is like, that's kind of, it's hokey, it's corny. So we're going to redo it with these practical effects, which people were legitimately, including my wife, Tiffany, like she is grossed out by The Fly.
It is gross.
And it's like, hell yeah. Like The Thing, obviously it's gross out stuff. The scene with Jed, like where he's in the kennel. It's like, it's not gross, or I'm not really scared. I don't get scared of much or whatever, and I don't get grossed out by much. But it is uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah,
because you're like, wow, this is really good. And if this were to really happen, that's disgusting.
Unfortunately, in 1982, like they got lambasted for the practical effects and all of that. It was too gory. It was too that. But like from 78 to 82, like it was nothing but blood splatter. So like,
I think it really did help with the legacy of it. Not to say that it couldn't have just been an isolated movie with no gore, because I think it probably would have stood on its own anyway. Mm-hmm. But I think it kind of like cemented its legacy. You know,
I think another thing that's interesting is the things that aren't like puppets, and it's just like the autopsy thing, or we haven't talked about the Norwegian facility where like it's all frozen out, and like the blood is like cut, or like he slits his wrist, and he also slits his neck, and it's like dripping blood, but the blood like freezes.
Icicles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, it's those like things that are like still like it's a prop you could probably buy at the Home Depot this year or whatever, but it's still like there's still something so creepy about it. And it's like how, I don't know, you want to say like beautiful, but not really, like just the artistic like composition of how it's just sets a scene, really.
I'm so glad you brought it up, because I don't know if I've seen that before or since The Thing, where you see the blood icicles,
right?
Where somebody cuts their wrists and the blood that's dripping from their wrists, freezes over.
Yeah,
it's like it's gruesome, right?
Right.
It is like, it is very telling. Like, because you're like, oh, this definitely could happen.
Right.
This definitely could happen.
Well, it's also that it just shows like what dire situation they were in.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, man, is that some bleak shit?
Yeah. Apparently, I was looking at that set for the Norwegian thing is the other facility set after they blew it up.
Yes.
They just like switched it over and covered it in ice, whatever, because they obviously the budget and stuff like that, which makes perfect sense. You blow up a set and then you got to have
reduce,
a set
reuse, recycle.
Right, exactly.
So it's perfect, man. So I guess last question for you, Hank, is so The Thing, it consistently comes up as one of the best horror movies of all time. What do you think contributes to that legacy?
I think it's the legacy of the practical effects when they happen. I think also just like the fun of the game, of the mystery of like who's who and who's what, and all the stuff we've talked about. I think it also like and I think it's cool that it still like affects us like today. Like there's the Among Us game, which I don't know if you guys have played, but that's like a very similar like I don't know if you've played it, Randy, or whatever.
No, but I've seen it.
Someone's an alien, and you're trying to figure out. It's like a multiplayer game. You're trying to figure out who's the alien on this. You're all working on a spaceship, and who's the alien? Who's the one that's like covered in whatever. Also, like, did you guys watch the last new season of True Detective?
Yes.
Where like it's the opening is like they're in a facility in Alaska in a frozen
There's so
area.
Many elements. There's point to like a love
and
of the thing.
It's a giant pile of bodies that is.
There's actually
unthawing.
If you look in the beginning of the show, the first episode, before like everything goes down, on the rack of like DVDs or whatever, The Thing is there, and it's standing out more than all the other things. Like they put their influences just like kind of front and center, which is I thought was a cool shout out.
And I'm not trying to give any spoilers away for True Detective for people that haven't seen it, but there's the scene with Navarro. It was one of the last episodes where they're going to search for something. No spoilers. And she's got the jacket and the hood up and the little headlamp, and it looks like the cover of The Thing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like, that's tongue in cheek.
And something funny enough to speak onto that legacy. Every expedition that goes to Antarctica now, like on their way, they in their first like meetings, they watch The Thing before they're on their shift for
you have to, right? Because I think you look back to the girl with the dragon tattoo, David Fincher. I'm sure whether it was conscious or subconscious, he's drawing back to John Carpenter's The Thing, because he's like, oh, how can I make this feel bleak? How can I do this or that? Well, John Carpenter already did it, so.
Well, and the use of we didn't get a chance to talk about the use of color work that Carpenter did. He muted everything so that the practical effects were that much more.
The gross yellows and greens and reds.
Right.
So I love it. So, well, those are all the questions that I had for you, Hank. Uncle Do, you got anything else?
I was just balling off of your questions. So this is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, bringing this movie that hits the mark for you, Hank.
Hits the mark.
I'm so excited because we had no idea what movie that you'd be bringing. You obviously brought it. This was your choice, and I love The Thing. You clearly love The Thing. So it's just that much more fun to talk about.
It's a real crowd pleaser.
It's a crowd
Everyone
pleaser,
loves it.
But it's fun to talk about. So, but Hank, any last thoughts, things you want to talk about?
No, go watch The Thing if you haven't seen it in a while. I don't know why you listen this far if you haven't watched it in a while. But we spoiled the whole thing. But.
And then Hank, but anything that you're working on that you want to plug or?
No, not right now.
Okay. Cool. Well, hey, yeah, like Dew said, thank you so much for bringing this. We're so excited to have you as our first ever guest on this podcast.
Thanks for having
Honestly,
me. Super fun.
Yeah, we'd love to have you maybe in the future.
Yeah, we'll see what you bring and
okay.
what movie hits the mark for you next time.
So a lot of thoughts happening. I gotta think of something.
So everybody, join us next time when we bring another movie that hits the marks for us, because we are the Movie Marks. I'm Matt Dewis, Uncle Dew.
And I'm Randy Kirk. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.